Good evening or good morning, wherever you are in the world. My name is SJ Chin, and I'm moderating the 7th YouTube session of the 7th International Women's Day edition of our Read for Pixels campaign. Through Read for Pixels, the Pixel Project is collaborating with 13 award-winning, best-selling authors to raise awareness about violence against women and to raise funds for the Pixel Project to keep our efforts to end violence against women alive and kicking. We'll be telling you more about the Read for Pixels fundraiser, which has lots and lots of exclusive author goodies a little later in this session. You can find out more about the Pixel Project by visiting www.thepixelproject.net. Now, today we have a very special guest for our live Read for Pixels discussion and Q&A session, the fabulous mystery and crime author SJ Rozan. SJ is the author of 18 novels and over 70 short stories and the editor of 2 anthologies. She has won multiple awards, including the Edgar, Seamus, Anthony, Nero, McAvity, Japanese Maltese Falcon, and the Private Eye Writers of America Life Achievement Award. And here we go. Hey, SJ. Welcome to Read for Pixels.
Hi, Chin. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, our pleasure. Now, aside from being with us here today, SJ has also generously donated a couple of super awesome goodies to the stash of author goodies we have up as perks for donors at the Read for Pixels Rally Up fundraising page. And the good news is that both these goodie bundles are available for donors worldwide. Now, goodie number 1 is SJ Rozan's Lydia and Bill goodie bundle. For one generous donor, SJ is offering a criminally good bundle of treats from her LYDIA CHIN and Bill Smith series featuring one first edition, signed and personalized hardcover of The Art of Violence. And this is one of the books in Bill's voice. There we go. And she's also giving one first edition, signed and personalized hardcover of Paper Sun, which is from Lydia's point of view. And as a bonus, you also get one handwritten note from LYDIA CHIN and one handwritten note from Bill Smith.
Completely authentic. Completely authentic.
And these come from SJ's personal library and can be considered collectibles for any book collectors out there. Or if you haven't yet read any of SJ's books, this is a great way to get immersed into her fantastic crime writing and storytelling while donating to support the cause to end violence against women and girls. Now, goodie number 2 has already been snapped up by Aubrey Hamilton. So thank you very much for your donation. This was an opportunity to name a minor character in XJ's next book, as well as to receive a signed and personalized copy of the book once it is published. This is indeed a rare opportunity, and we hope you've got your thinking cap on to come up with a good name, Aubrey. Now, so far, we've only raised $1,990 towards our $5,000 goal, despite being almost halfway through our fundraiser. So please do give generously before the fundraiser ends on April 15th. Every cent goes towards the Pixel Project's work to help end violence against women. Now, if you're watching this session on YouTube right now, you will also be able to ask SJ questions live. Just make sure you're logged onto your YouTube account so that you can type your questions into the chat box to the right of the YouTube screen. And Denisha, who is today's producer and chat box moderator, will relay them to me to read out to SJ to answer. And now over to SJ. What will you be reading for us today?
I'm reading from the beginning of a short story called Undocumented. It is from a collection called Hell of a Woman, edited by Megan Abbott. It's a few years old, this story, but I actually chose it to read a number of weeks ago, and it is particularly relevant right now. So I'll read, it's probably about 10 minutes from the story, not quite halfway through. So you might have to buy Hell of a Woman to read the rest.
All right, then the floor is yours, SJ.
Thank you. Undocumented. None of the Snakehead's men could say with certainty that Wei An Lin was behind the women's revolt. Still, they scowled and cursed her, the more because their maledictions bounced off her like arrows striking rock. Though for all the men spitting and scowling, it was hardly a revolt, just a coordination of the single women, those with no husbands to protect them. A schedule of waking and sleeping, of cooking and going on deck and using the toilet in groups of 4, of 6. A system that made all accountable for each, left none alone, unwatched, unguarded. For the snakeheads men, access to the women was an expected recompense for the long, hard months at sea. Their quarters were little better than the cargo's, nor their food, and the weather and the boredom and the rolling of the ship were the same. As always, when collecting the cargo, they'd taken note of the meek, the frightened, the ones who came from farthest and came to the wharf alone. These were the promising ones. No man had counted Wei and Lin among them. Flinty, one said. Another said stringy, like a laying hen, too old for eggs, but still cackling. Wei and Lin wasn't old, though she'd likely seen 30, but they all understood, and they all laughed. So when, not a week out to sea, they were met with a new, if tentative, defiance, even from the most timid women, the men erupted in anger and confusion. These were strong and brutal men. They resolved disputes with force. No matter how organized, of course the women could never have withstood an equally organized assault by the men. Some of the men argued for it, as a lesson to future groups, if nothing else. But the enforcer forbade it. Victory was assured, but so was damage to the cargo. The men were being well paid. The cargo, on the other hand, were expected to work off their passage once they reached America. As a matter of loyalty to the snakehead, it was the men's duty to deliver the cargo whole. A matter of loyalty, a matter of paycheck, of future prospects, and in the end, of their own good health. The men grumbled, but did as told, especially after Xu Zhao vanished. He'd been the most angry, the most vocal, the most likely to disobey the enforcer, and one morning he was gone. Had the enforcer, unable to control him, gotten rid of him? Was the brown stain on the deck his blood? Was he far behind them now, riding the gray sea? Many agreed that must be what had happened, though some said the enforcer would never have denied it if he'd done it. On the contrary, he'd have boasted of it. And others claimed to have seen a gleam of steely triumph in Wei An Lin's eyes. The enforcer took no action against Wei An Lin for leading the women or for anything else. It was a quiet voyage, better than most. No rowdy demands for more food, more light, more cooking fuel. As for water, the women in their groups emerged on deck in each rainstorm like earthworms from the ground. They brought cooking pots, thermos bottles, even, it seemed to the enforcer, thimbles. They carried the water below, where other women waited with cloths to dry them and warm them. They stored the fresh water, bathed in it, washed clothes, boiled tea. They shared it with the couples and the single men. After 2 weeks at sea, the cargo in the hold might have been one village, all uprooted and come together. They cooked together, helped each other, fashioned gongs from pots, and taught each other peasant songs. One of the married men was chosen spokesman. He approached the enforcer with respect, but not subservience, when problems arose. But these were few, as they dealt with most themselves. The enforcer, as was his duty and practice, made frequent descents into the hold. On most crossings, these visits were required for intimidation. This time, he felt as an official from the capital might in a rural village. Eyes followed him, but he was walking through a vibrant life in which he had no part. On other voyages, he dreaded these descents, more so as the time stretched on and the hold grew rank. Now he found it less necessary to steel himself. Because water was abundant, the smells of people pent up for weeks never grew as potent as they might. Even sometimes he imagined he caught a whiff of an aroma from memory, something appealing, something appetizing, as meals were cooked. He learned it was not memory. Wei An Lin, in her single poor suitcase, carried paper-wrapped packages of spices, herbs, dried roots. The packets were not labeled. Wei An Lin could barely read or write. But certainly she could cook. Her herbs, shared with the others, transformed the rice and vegetables on which the cargo subsisted into tempting stir-fries and stews. The enforcer found himself irritable in the presence of the ship's cook, who produced for the crew meals of more substance, but less enticement. On his trips into the hold, the enforcer saw that Wei An Lin was everywhere, almost always in conversation with a group, a couple, a man, or a woman. Often she was intent. Sometimes her eyes held a steely glint. Only rarely did he find her sitting alone. Twice he saw her poring over a letter whose creases were soft-edged, so many times had it been opened and refolded. Laboriously, she traced each character with a finger. She wasn't reading it, he realized. She'd memorized it, and was learning the characters that went with the sense she already knew. One day he spoke to her. "Where do you come from?" "Goose Creek Village in Fujian Province." "Goose Creek Village, I've heard of it." "You've emptied it. Many are gone. All who leave go through Snakehead Ma Guo." He frowned. "You know the Snakehead's name?" "Yours also, Lurong." "How is this?" Her smile held a sharp edge. "A full jar, an empty jar, both are silent when shaken. It's the jar half empty that sounds. Goose Creek Village is half empty now." He was troubled by her knowledge, but went on. "What you've done on this ship, it eases the voyage. If it eases it for you, for the Snakehead's men, that's your luck, not my goal." "What is your goal?" The enforcer was curious. "These people's hopes are high, but will be crushed. Their lives in America will hold more misery than they know. Why should they suffer more than they must?" Every word Wei An Lin said was true, though there were words she didn't say. More misery than they know, Lu repeated. "But you know, yet you go to America too. Are your hopes high?" "No." He held her in a quiet look. "You go in search of work?" "Why else would I go?" Although it was a real question and had a real answer, Wei An Lin did not expect Lu Rong to understand that. He did not. "What you've done here you could do on other voyages," he said. "I'll speak to the Snakehead. In 1 year, your passage will be repaid. If you stay beyond, you could earn a good wage." "You'd offer a job to a woman?" "I never have before." But Wei An Lin refused.
Wow, that's quite a cliffhanger ending. And
Yes.
seeing that I read this short story, I can tell all you viewers out there that there's quite an interesting twist later on. So if you want to know the resolution, you're going to have to get the anthology.
A Hell of a Woman, edited by Megan Abbott.
Lovely. Okay, so we'll move on to the questions now. So SJ, you have written numerous novels and short stories featuring interesting, resourceful, and compelling female characters. The most well-known of whom is probably New York private investigator Lydia Chin from the Lydia Chin Bill Smith mystery series. Now, who or what are your inspiration for your female characters?
Well, I have to admit, growing up, as a woman, I was always looking for strong female characters, and when I was a kid, all the strong characters were men, with the exception of women I found in mysteries for kids. Nancy Drew was a tremendous influence on me. Nancy Drew and she had a boyfriend. He was useful because he had a car, Ned Nickerson.
Yes.
But her two investigative buddies were her girlfriends, were Beth and George. And Nancy Drew just went about she just did the business. She just did what she had to do. She got in trouble. She got herself out of trouble. And she was a real inspiration later on for the kind of characters I wrote. I also have to admit that the male characters I was reading, I, in a sense, rewrote as women. There was no reason in my mind why they were all men. It seemed more coincidence than anything else. Now, of course, I know the sociology and all behind it, but it seemed to me that women could do that. And so that was when I was, making up stories in my head, which is what every writer does all the time when you're in second grade and supposed to be listening to the teacher. These were all stories with female, strong female characters. And so when I came to write Lydia, I actually knew a Chinese American woman I had known in graduate school, and then we were working in the same firm. And she was one of my inspirations for Lydia. And oddly, I told her that once, and her reaction was, "Oh my God, no! Lydia's much more efficient than I am." Efficient was that was her. That was the thing that Lydia had that she didn't. And I thought, yeah, well, she also like walks in front of guns and stuff. But okay, but it was, that was my. She was one of the of the people I knew who just seemed to me like she'd make a great private eye. So that was where those characters tend to come from.
Oh, interesting. And yes, Nancy Drew was an introductory character into Mystery and Crime for me too. So that's awesome. And yeah, speaking of, the mystery and crime genre does have its share of female stereotypes and tropes. And in addition, the genre does not have many Chinese American female detectives, private investigators, or amateur sleuths. So, with Chinese American female protagonists such as Lydia, it's not a stretch to deduce that the risk of stereotyping is doubled when gender and race intersect. So, why did you choose? Oh, so you did answer this a bit, but why did you choose to write about a Chinese American female detective? And how do you challenge stereotypes to create Chinese American female characters with agency, like Lydia, her best friend, New York police detective Mary Key, and even her mother, Yong Yun, when dealing with the world around them, including situations that involve sexism, misogyny, and violence against women and girls?
Well, yeah, that is a multi-part question. Where Lydia came from was the same place Bill came from, in a sense. Bill is a classic, iconic, even that world-weary male voiceover private eye. And the thing about that character is that the reason he's able to be successful in saving people is that he has himself rejected the possibility of being what the world would easily allow him to be. He could own the world. He's a straight white male. He could own the world, but the private eye, his conscience really won't let him do it. The female, the corresponding female character is someone like Lydia, who never would have owned the world. You can't reject what you weren't being given, but in her case is trying to take it. And in her particular case, because she's something / American, she's living in two cultures, she is trying to be who she wants to be without rejecting the culture she's coming from. And the reason that Lydia is Chinese American is because when I decided to create the character as different from the iconic white male character as possible, I realized that it would help if she weren't white, if she had a whole other set of issues to contend with. And I chose Chinese American as opposed to any other kind of hyphenated American, because I have always been interested in Chinese culture, Chinese literature, Chinese music. I really don't know where that started, but it's always been true of me. And so I had a grounding in a lot of things in the poetry and the music and the art that I wouldn't have had in another culture that wasn't my own. So that was how Lydia became Chinese. Also, it enabled me it gave me a great excuse to do a lot of research into things I loved anyway, including the food. And so Lydia has now, as you said, these two easily stereotyped attributes. She's a woman and she's Asian, and this can cause a lot of trouble that she's always fighting against. And it was very important to me from the beginning that Lydia not be a dragon lady, that she not be, she's proficient in taekwondo, a form of karate, but she's not, she can't knock over six bad guys in one fight with a spinning sidekick. It's just, she's not magic that way. She is not a sex pot. She's not all those words that get assigned in Western culture, and this, of course, has echoes in what happened in Atlanta just this week. But all those words that get assigned to Asians, exotic, inscrutable. I wanted Lydia to be none of that, and that was very important to me. However, it's also true that people will see her that way anyway. And in the early books, this was an issue until Bill finally said, "You don't realize what a great advantage this is. You're being underestimated." When people make these assumptions about you, that you're just a woman, that you're just Chinese, you're being underestimated, and you can use that. And it's really very handy in our profession. And he, as a big white man, doesn't get underestimated that way. And a lot of people close doors in his face immediately because they know he's trouble. Lydia can go places where he can't go, can get information he can't get. I try really hard to make the one thing she doesn't do to get information the one thing she doesn't do is to act like Mata Hari. She's not a honeypot, a honey trap. Yeah, a honey trap. Honeypot is something else. A honey trap, but
Yes.
right. But other than that, she can just play the I'm only a girl card. And in fact, in the book I'm writing now, she's going to a meeting with the client, who is also a young woman. And Bill says, "Do you want me to come?" And she says, "Are you kidding? He'll talk much more openly to us than to you." And Bill says, "You're going to play the we're just girls card, aren't you?" And Lydia says, "Damn right I am." And so that's, but if she needed to, she could kick the guy's ass also. And that's how I handle that. And I wanted that deliberately. I wanted her to have these issues because people do have these issues. When you the white female private eyes have a single issue, but so few of us have just a single issue. So that was my thinking on that.
That's interesting, and so you've explained that within the context of the universe of your series, but you know, now, okay, definitely your female characters are multifaceted women with agency, but in the case of Chinese and other non-white female characters, readers may perceive them as unlikable or trying too hard, instead of lauding them as likable and hilarious as they would if they were male and white. So, when you write your books, do you ever feel pressured by gender and cultural expectations to make your female characters' independence and style of humor relatable and likable, particularly with, as you said, negative stereotypes ranging from, submissive Asian women to the sex pot to the dragon ladies, still very much alive?
I can't say that I do. I don't really know. I mean, if you start making people relatable, then you have to say relatable to whom. The readers who have been reading me, and the readers I hope to continue to grow that readership, are people to whom people like Lydia are relatable. That Lydia's kind of humor is something they can appreciate, and that someone like Lydia's mother, who does not see herself as funny, and who I think is just a riot. Um, that people can see that also, and not see her either. I mean, she has yet a third issue, Young Yun, in that she's elderly, so she's not only female and Asian, but she's elderly, and so she
Mm.
is completely discounted in many ways. She and I try to write her as also not the stereotype she could be, um, and that's that. It gets all these things that get really difficult. But I have never felt pressured, and I have to admit I've never felt pressured from either of my agents. I've had two agents, or any of my editors, to make to make Lydia more into something that the reading public might expect from her, or from a female Asian private eye.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can see where what you're talking about, especially with Yong Yun, because she can quite easily slip into a stereotypical Chinese tiger mom kind of personality. But I know you also have a novella that focuses on her. I haven't read it yet, but I'm sure that would be quite interesting.
I have actually not a novella, but a set of short stories. Um,
Ah.
Years ago, I was asked to write a short story for an anthology um, that focused on the older detective. All the detectives had to be 60 and above. And so I wrote the first Young Yun story, and I really enjoyed it. And I've written, I think, 8 or 9 so far. And as soon as I have enough to make a book, I will put them together into a book. They're all rather long, so I may have enough now. But I enjoy her voice. Also, there's less violence in the Yong Yun stories. Lydia carries a gun, and she can get into a fight. There are threats of that kind of thing sometimes in the Yong Yun stories, but her principal attribute is her brains, her cleverness. She thinks 4 or 5 steps ahead of the people she's trying to outwit, and she does outwit them because they underestimate her, and B, even if they didn't underestimate her, they're not as good as she is at thinking ahead. She would have been a hell of a chess player if she had ever taken up the game, and that's what I like when I write her. That's what I like to focus on.
Nice. And I'm sure we look forward to this Yong Yun anthology. Okay, so I mean, yeah, speaking of Yong Yun and relationships, your books definitely pass the Bechdel test with your depiction of complex and interesting relationships between women, including female friendships and family relationships with camaraderie and complexity that feel very real to many female readers. And for those watching who are not familiar with the Bechdel test, it basically asks whether a work, whether book, movie, TV series, etc., features at least two women talking to each other about something other than men. Now, SJ, why do you think many authors, including mystery and crime authors, still have trouble writing stories that pass the Bechdel test, despite the fact that there are so many more things that women talk about other than men?
Well, in a lot of in the case of male writers, it might be just it's kind of obvious they don't know that. Um, their female characters really have nothing to do but talk about men. I don't know really in the among the female writers I know, um, or I read, especially in the crime genre, there is an awful lot of when you're investigating a crime, you really can't sit around talking about men, and the women as you say, have agency and get up and go and do things, because that's what the book is about. There are other genres where that's not so true. There are genres where women don't appear as much. Women are more rare in thrillers, in international thrillers, in some kinds of science fiction, in certain police procedurals. But these days in the crime genre, women are everywhere and working with other women, doing things that they need to do the way in real life we all do. I don't remember the last long, intense conversation about men that I had with another woman. We when we have long, intense conversations, the subject of men comes up and goes away, and other things come up and go away. But I think that there's also in when you're writing fiction a need to cut out a lot of what actually happens in the real world, and unfortunately, a lot of fiction writers, filmmakers, playwrights, and so on cut out all the stuff that isn't about relationships, because relationships are in especially in Western narrative are have a very central focus, whereas in real life they don't have quite the same focus. So I wonder if that's part of it. But I must say, in books, there tends to be less, more books pass the Bechdel test than film, I think. But that's a totally unscientific theory of mine.
Okay, so I mean, understandably, so what you said, but what can you suggest for writers who do want to write female conversations and relationships realistically?
For female writers, it's not that hard. You just write the last conversation you had with your sister. For male writers, it's more difficult because really they haven't been in on those conversations. On the other hand, we don't talk about things that different from what men talk about. We see them in different ways, maybe, but everything from the weather to your lousy subway ride this morning to the fact that your boss has just asked you to work the weekend again. All of these things come up in conversations between women. And if I were giving advice to a male writer, I would say, do not try to write the pajama party. You don't know what 5 women in their pajamas with a glass of wine are going to talk about, and you will never know. Just like I wouldn't write the conversation in the bar right after the big game among the football players. I came as close as I could in Winter and Night, but that's as close as I could. I'll just never know really what goes on there. But what you can write is the conversation of a woman and her husband as the woman is going off to the pajama party, or 2 women shopping for the wine for the pajama party, that kind of thing. You can write what you might have been part of. But too many male writers try to write women characters as though a woman character and the women you know in your life are different animals. And what happens is, of course, the women characters come out totally wrong. I would suggest to male writers that you just pay attention to what the actual women in your actual life actually do, from what they talk about to how they organize their shopping lists. They're not, those are your characters. And just, the men you feel instinctively, the women, you don't have to make them up. It's not like Martians that you have to make up. So that would be my advice. Of course, what I'm really saying is that men should pay attention to who women really are. And that's a whole other conversation.
So yes, it may be fiction, but stay true to real women.
Yeah, real women who, are around you all day.
Okay, we have a question from the audience. So this is from Misty, who's one of our regular viewers. Hi, Misty.
I miss.
And so you mentioned Nancy Drew as a character series which inspired you and your books. Are there any modern female detectives from stories you enjoy reading?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Laurie King and her Sherlock Holmes, Mary Russell, or Mary Russell Sherlock Holmes stories. I'm trying to. Naomi Hirahara has a new book out set in Chicago. She had a really interesting short-lived series about a bicycle cop in Los Angeles, which was a great concept. And Louise Penny, well, but that's really the detective is really the male character, the female writer. Let me stick with those, with Naomi Hirahara and Laurie King.
And we have a comment from Jane Young who says, "Amen, SJ, to writing about real women." Okay, so let's move on to the guys now. So there are a wide variety of male characters in your books, ranging from the sexist and misogynist to those who respect their female colleagues, friends, and associates as their equals. Do you think reframing how stories describe men away from hostile and toxic stereotypes and towards complexity and even vulnerability can be one of the ways mystery and crime writers can break away from harmful tropes that promote toxic masculinity and the dehumanization of women in the genre?
Oh, the only answer to that question is yes. I think it's very easy in this genre to fall back on those tropes, on the loner detective, the loner male detective with demons in his past, and if I see one more book about the sexy FBI agent and her grumpy male partner who doesn't want to be partnered with a woman, and this is it's boring already. But men as well as women are real people, and they're all complex. And while it's easy to write the tropes, they're not real people. And my readers, anyway, seem to want to read about real people. And if you can give them even the worst sexist, misogynist, whatever, the most evil character you can is still a real person. And to write about men who are also struggling with these issues. There are men who really don't even know whether it's okay. Oh, here comes the cat again. Look at that. This is Bella the cat, ladies and gentlemen. Bella is making her appearance. There she goes. How can you be serious when there's a cattail behind you? Men. I was talking about men, evil
Yes.
men, bad men, good men. Yeah, okay. There are men, good men, right now who don't know whether it's okay to open a door and let a woman go through or not. Which is more insulting, to walk through before her or to open it for her?
Yep.
And these are issues that confuse these guys because they were raised to believe that chivalry was a good thing and this is how you be chivalrous. And now we're telling them you can't do that. That's sexist. And these are, I mean, that's a silly example, but these are real issues for guys. They don't know what they don't know what to do. And
Bella's trying to weigh in.
yeah, Bella has some things to say on the subject. And when you write characters for whom things like this are issues, or who don't want to think about these issues, or who have made their decision and decided which side they're coming down on and do open doors or don't open doors or whatever, these are real characters, and your audience can relate. And your audience, if these are people who've made other decisions from the ones they would make, your audience can say, wait a minute, but I see what he was thinking when he did that. And my feeling is that writing is all about asking questions to which you don't have the answers. It's all about illuminating the question. If I can open the question up wide enough for people to really see the question, then people can work on their own answers. If I had answers, I'd probably stop writing. But all I have is questions.
Always a good place to start from. We've got like quite a few viewers who say hi. Okay, Jane Young, Misty, Jacqueline Fermer, and all say hi to Bella.
Bella, you're very popular.
Okay. To home in on one particular stereotype. Do you think that eventually the violent alpha male type character will phase out of mystery and crime books as cultures worldwide start kicking out toxic masculinity, or do you think it's one of those stereotypes that would stick around for much longer than expected?
Well, I'm hoping the only way it sticks around is as the bad guy. As the toxic male, that is, in the same way as Nazis have stuck around a long time. Now they're coming back, but always as bad guys in literature, always as bad guys. I would like to see this rough, tough, macho male, if he appear not just to women in crime fiction as a bad guy, but to the men of crime fiction also, who will start seeing that toxic male as the bad guy. That I don't think that the character will disappear, but I think because somebody has to be the enemy, somebody has to be the bad guy, or else we don't have crime fiction because nobody's committing crimes. But I would like to see that character go into that slot and become another form of social evil.
Okay. Yeah. And speaking of evil, as you know, stories can be one of the most powerful ways of bringing about social change. Now, books and stories in the mystery crime genre usually involve some kind of violence, including violence against women. Rape and sexual assault, or at least the threat of it, is something that is present in many mystery crime novels and is often a major plot driver. Do you think that consent is an issue that mystery and crime authors have started tackling successfully in recent years?
I would not say that, because rape and the threat of sexual violence are used by the bad guys, and the bad guys aren't interested in consent. I think it is a real problem in the genre that so many of what happens in crime novels is often there's somebody is killed at the beginning, and that sets the story going. And very often that victim and the subsequent victims are women, and they are often killed in particularly unpleasant ways, although there isn't really a pleasant way to get killed. But they the idea of the woman as overpowered victim is an old one in crime literature, and I think a real problem. Um, it it is it's a peculiar situation because and I dealt with this early on. I think I dealt with it in the first in China Trade, which was the first book, the first Lydia Chin book, because I had read that Sarah Paretsky had said one situation she would never put her female private eye in was a situation of sexual violence because it's just too easy for men to imagine that. And I thought, well, yeah, and she's a terrific feminist and one of the founders of the female private eye subgenre, but it is actually a threat that any female private eye lives with, as any woman does. And women, when we walk out the door, look both ways and are aware of everybody on the street in a way that a man isn't. And for Lydia, who is a small woman, it really is a threat. It's not a threat that intimidates her any more than any other threat, but these things do exist. And I think that the issue of consent and the issue of sexual violence are not the same. They intersect at a place that we often refer to as date rape or inappropriate touching or that kind of thing. But that's not the kind of sexual violence that you find in crime novels, where you find rape and dismemberment and really kind of horrible physical violence, which is also sexual violence against women. Not the kind of thing that a man could credibly or not so credibly claim he was just confused. That's not the kind of violence against women that is problematic in crime novels, and that that Sarah Paretsky absolutely kind of categorically rejects from her books. I don't categorically reject it, but I want it always in context, so that I won't, for example, deal with serial killers. Although, having said that, there is one in The Art of Violence. But the whole trope of serial killers murdering prostitutes is something that it's too easy. It's too easy.
Mm. Yeah, and I think so. I think one of the issues is that sometimes writers tend to just reduce female characters in mystery and crime books who have experienced rape or domestic violence or childhood sexual abuse just to the sum of their trauma. Do you have any tips or suggestions on how they can not do that?
Well, first, I think the question is why are you doing that? What role is the character just serving a purpose in the book, or is the character a live person who has a story? This is where you want to remember that there are no minor characters, that everybody is the major character in her or his own story, so that the people who are just playing a role in your book, you're really shortchanging them, because in their own book, they are the major character and they have a life. And to reduce somebody to a useful victim in your book is really to negate them, to negate their existence. As I go back to, these are real people, like writing real women and real men. I had a friend once, a writer, who said, the most important character in your book is the victim, even if the victim is dead before the book opens. You know, even if in the first sentence you find the body, that's the most important character, because the life that character lived is what got the entire story going. And if you think of it that way, then these characters can't just be ciphers. They can't just be convenient bodies that you can leave lying around so that your detective has something to do. These are people who had effects on other people, and it was those effects that caused whatever happened to happen. And I think that it just keeps coming back to writing about real people as though it were the stories of real people that other people wanted to read, because it is. Those are the stories people want. This is not to say that everything needs to be as dark and depressing as people's real lives often are, but you need your people to be actual living people that if you met them on the street you would know them, and they would be going about their daily life. And when they come alive that way, and you can write about them that way, they will continue to exist beyond the page they're on, and the book will be much richer for it.
Yes. So it's like they may be fictional, but they are real within your fictional universe, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's nobody is cardboard,
Mhm.
even
And
though they're fiction.
yeah, and Jacqueline Firmer says, here, here, I love that your books don't use the threat of sexual violence as a titillating plot hook. Too many books do.
Here,
That's
here,
true.
indeed.
Hmm. And yeah, and speaking about writing realistically, the Staunch Prize, which is an award set up in 2018 to recognize crime and thriller novels without violence against women, was launched and faced criticism from major crime novelists like Velma Dermot, who believe that as long as there is violence against women in the world, it should be reflected in fiction. So, what is your take on the idea that mystery, crime, and thriller books can work without some form of violence against women? Do you think it's feasible given some of the long-standing genre conventions and tropes?
Absolutely, it's absolutely feasible. Val, she's a friend of mine, and she's right in that you can't pretend it doesn't exist. And in books where it makes sense to use it, then I think it's phony not to use it. But in many books, it makes sense not to use it. I don't think that it has ever been a central idea in any of my books. I've had all kinds of, I can't even remember all the plots of my books, unfortunately, but none of them revolve around the threat of sexual violence. I am not big on violence per se anyway. My people tend to get shot or stabbed or thrown off buildings. They don't, I think I only had one poisoning, because poison is really kind of horrifying when you think of what it really does. And I don't get into creative violence. Um, Other people do. Val is very good at it, but I don't. I don't see any reason not to have a prize that rewards books without violence against women, because that's not the same thing as censoring any book with violence against women. You know what I mean?
Mm,
It is not a bad idea to encourage people to think in other ways about crime. Most crime, there are really basically in real life two kinds of crime. One is the crime of what we call passion, but it isn't always sexual passion. It's a crime of anger, of emotion, of strong emotion. And the other is a crime about money. And money is a tremendous motive that may be very tangled up in people's feelings of sexual adequacy and, but money is the driving force in the commission of the crime. There's no reason not to write about that, which is not to say that any writer who has a tremendously strong urge to write a different kind of book that involves violence and that involves violence against women should be told not to write that kind of book. But there is absolutely no reason not to recognize books that are not like that. And I find it odd that writers should object to an award that doesn't cancel anything. We're talking about cancel culture. Nothing is canceled by this award. Something is recognized. It's as odd as saying that there shouldn't be national awards. The American National Book Award. I know the Japanese have a whole series of book awards. There's the Singapore has a book award. To say that those awards shouldn't exist because there are also books written in other countries is a little odd to me. And this strikes me as the same thing. Because there's violence against women, to not have an award that celebrates books without violence against women, this is not a logical step.
They don't cancel each other.
They really don't. They really don't. And there's no reason not to have them both. I would object to an award for a book specifically with violence against women. That is, the most violent against women book gets an award this year. That I would object to. But this, I can't see how this does any damage at all to even to the understanding that this violence does exist and we need to acknowledge it.
True. And and how do you find a balance between showing violence as an integral part of the story, but not showing violence gratuitously?
The same way I do with sex scenes, which I also don't really write. I will write violence in the sense of, I'll write a fight. I'll write a gunshot. I'll write a stabbing. But I won't write violence porn the same way I won't write sex porn. That is pages and pages of streaming blood and pain from the slice, as James Thurber once said, from your guggle to your zatch. I just, there's no reason for it that I can see. The kind of violence we saw on screen in Reservoir Dogs, I did not love. And I certainly wouldn't love to read about it. And there's no possible way I would write about it. To me, the violence that happens in my books is a plot driver. It's not a place to stop and glory in it. The worst characters in my books are not really violent, sadistic killers. They're people with much bigger destructive aims. And, they want to destroy people, to destroy families, to destroy people they hate, whatever. And they may mean by killing them, but they also may mean by reducing them to terrible circumstances, whatever. And the violence is not a place any more than the sex is to stop for a couple of pages and give the reader a visceral thrill. That's not what I write, and it's certainly not what I like to read. Um, so I think a lot of people don't, can understand that there is violence without actually seeing it on the page and going on and on and on.
Yes, there's no need for torture porn, as Jane Young says.
Torture porn. That's exactly right. There's I don't there is an audience for it. I don't really even want to meet those people, and I certainly don't want to write it.
Mm. So, do you think it's important for influential authors such as yourself, who are read all over the world, to make a conscious effort to include characters in your stories that show readers the importance of respecting women as equals and as human beings?
Yes, absolutely. I think that one of the things that happens is, you were talking about tropes before, and I think one of the things that happens is that people fall back for the minor characters, who are not minor in their own lives, but they fall back on the characters who we've seen before and who can easily be replaced by women, by non-white people, by disabled people, by gay people, and the book will become much richer. And in this vein, I have to tell a story, and this is absolutely every word of it true. I was having a problem with the book I'm writing now, and I talked to two friends, one of whom is a writer, and the other is just a very smart guy. And we were having coffee with our masks and everything, and I was complaining about the book, and I was telling them what the problem was, which they had urged me to do. I don't do this to everybody, but just lay my problems on everybody. But they wanted to know, so I told them, and they had a really good idea between them, and so I went to write that idea, and I emailed them, and I said, I'm going to name characters in the book after you. And one of them said, okay, who? And that was the woman. The man was easy to name somebody after. And the woman, I thought, gee, I don't have any leftover women characters in this book. But I do have one kind of, minor character. I don't know what his deal is. I'll just make him a woman and give him her name. And boy, did that character take over the book. Once it was a woman in that position, because she was very high up in a Chinese tong. He had been very high up in the tong. Suddenly it was a woman high up in the tong. And I thought, oh my God, how did she get there? What is her story? This is very rare. Who does she have to be in this position? And he was just basically a kind of information deliverer. She became an entire book to herself almost. And
Wow.
That was just because I let go of the stereotype of the male high up tong character and brought in a woman. And I was thinking, boy, you could do that. You could bring in, for a wealthy, an evil, wealthy, sneering financier, bring in a black man. How did he get in that position? What made him the way he is? You could do this all the time. You could just substitute for the expected character, who is usually a man, substitute someone else and see what it does for you. And I think that that we do have a responsibility. Writers who are widely read have that responsibility to show your readers that the world is full of interesting people, not just your character and your character's three best buddies, but everybody around them is interesting people. This was why I never could watch Friends. Friends was six beautiful white people living in a beautiful apartment. They didn't seem to know anybody else. They didn't seem to know not only anybody of color, but they didn't know anybody elderly. They didn't know anybody, either mentally or physically disabled. They didn't know anybody but themselves, and they were boring to me. Um,
Mm.
and the world, that's not who the world is full of. And who the world is full of is actually very interesting people. So
So
that's
true, so true.
that's my I that the answer to your question is yes, I do think writers have that responsibility, and it's a responsibility that actually creates better work. It's
Mm.
fulfilling that responsibility gives you lots and lots of options you probably weren't even seeing before yourself, the way I never saw that. um if I just renamed this character, made it a woman, I would have an entire dimension in the book I never had before. So thank you to
Mm.
my friend, and when you all read the book, um, you will know who I'm talking about. Um,
Yeah,
I'm
I mean,
actually
and
I
mm,
I actually let me say I'm talking about a Singaporean writer, um,
mm,
Cheryl Tan. Tan
yes.
Luyen. Um,
Mm,
yes, and when you read her name in the book, she's an evil Tong uh, uh, leader. So
so Cheryl's alter ego.
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
and Regina, I mean, Regina says, people underestimate Asian women so much. So many Chinese women, in particular, are heads of our families, but maybe unofficially. So it's not inconceivable for a woman to head a Tong.
Yeah, a lot of families are more lethal and complicated than a Tong. Um,
Mm.
well, and especially since a Tong actually has a hierarchy, and families, the hierarchical scrabble is always going on. So yeah, I think that I haven't heard of it, of a woman heading a Tong, but I would not be surprised if someone told me, oh yeah, this was a situation in which it happened.
Yes, but the last real head of the Chinese dynasty was the Dowager Queen, right? So
That's true. That's true.
Mm. And yes, and speaking of thinking of alternate characters, we have a question from Jane Young. I heard a rumor you're going to write about small time hamsters. Can you tell us about that?
I, I think Jane Young better talk to Regina Yao. Um, yeah, it was all Regina's fault. What happened, to those of you who don't know, is that I posted on my Facebook page that I had written a sentence that where somebody told somebody else that about some people that they're just a bunch of small time gangsters, but my typing was so bad that autocorrect made it small time hamsters, and it just cracked me up. So I posted that, and Regina Yao started posting hamster related material, funnier and funnier. There's a big hamster jailbreak, and then Regina admitted to writing. She's writing a book that has to do with terrorist chickens. So, but between the chickens and the hamsters, I think we can get something going here. Yeah, I think
I'm
this
sure
this
we
might be
can.
a whole new kind of children's book, about about small time hamsters and terrorist chickens. Yeah. Thank you, Jane.
Lovely. And well, we have come to our last two questions. So you have been so very incredibly supportive of our Read for Pixels campaign and our anti-violence against women work as a whole. And this may be a bit of an obvious question, but why do you support the cause to end violence against women?
Yeah, I mean, any woman who doesn't is a suspect in my opinion. Violence against women. Women are half the people on this planet. Why violence against women is even still an issue is really just. I mean, the fact that it is just appalling. The recent shootings in Atlanta um, are as much a hate crime against women as against Asians, and I think that the 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 roots of violence against women are go back to the education of girls and boys, and really needs to be fought at every level. And I think that there can't there can't be a free world if women don't feel free to walk around alone safely.
Mm, yes, indeed. And specifically for authors, what do you think that authors can do to help with the cultural change needed to eradicate violence against women and girls?
I think that they can write female characters who don't seem in the male mind to invite violence. They can write characters who aren't stereotypes, who aren't, as we were talking way earlier about Lydia, dragon ladies, or um, little delicate flowers, or women who don't need protection from men, but also aren't, that the reason they don't need protection is not that they have 19 different black belts in different martial arts. It's that they're strong, they're individuals, they know what they're doing, and their world reflects that. If you write characters like that for people to read about, their world will grow. If the only characters people see are women as victims and men as either perpetrators or white knights, then nothing will change. So I think that writers have a responsibility to write about women as though we were real people, because we are. Um,
We are indeed.
we are.
And hmm, and I'll just share two final comments from the audience. So Jin Yang says, "Truth to power, SJ." And this cute one, a suggestion for, the title, maybe Jacqueline Femer, for your story, The Shawshank Redemption. I like that one.
I might have to write that book.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm the voice, mysterious voice off screen, if you joined us a bit later. So thank you, SJ, for that excellent session and such thoughtful answers. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in and participating in the conversation. Before we go, I would just like to remind everyone about the goodie bundles that SJ has generously donated to our stash of author goodies that are perks for donors at our Read for Pixels Rally Up fundraising page. Goodie number one, which is available to donors worldwide, is SJ Rozan's Lydia and Bill goodie bundle, where she is offering an awesome bundle of treats from her Lydia Chin and Bill Smith series for one generous donor. And this includes one first edition, signed and personalized hardcover of The Art of Violence. Oops, the one that just dropped off.
That one.
And this one of books in a Bill Smith's voice. And one first edition, signed and personalized hardcover of Paper Sun, which is from Lydia's point of view. You will also get one handwritten note from Lydia Chin and one handwritten note from Bill Smith. And they offer the extra cachet of coming from SJ's personal library. Now, so if you haven't read any of SJ's books, this is a great way to get introduced to this great mystery series while also donating to support the cause to end violence against women.
And these, I will send them anywhere in the world. If you're wondering, if you're sitting there in Singapore thinking, "Gee, I wish I had those books," you can.
Yay! So, thanks so much, SJ, for sharing that. And and goodie number two, which was an opportunity to name a minor character in SJ's next book, has already been snapped up by Aubrey Hamilton. So once again, thank you very much for your donation, Aubrey.
For $5,000, I will give you the opportunity not to be in my next book. Just send the money to the Pixel Project, and you'll guarantee not appear in my book.
Oh, well, if you have 5,000 to spare, please do send it to us. And there are also plenty more other author goodies available this week from authors and publishers such as Julia Quinn, Tasha Shuri, Reese Bowen, Bridget Camera, Kieran Millwood Hargrave, Anna Stephens, Jodie Meadows, Julie Shaneza, and Thanks Books. Additional treats will also be released this coming Thursday, so do tune in. And here's where you can go to get the goodies. Let me get my slide up on screen for you guys to have a look at. Okay, there you go. So you can donate to get these goodies on Rally Up at bit.ly/R4P Rally Up IWD 2021. And if you want to learn more about Read for Pixels, go to bit.ly/Read for Pixels. And I believe our moderator is sharing this on the YouTube chat session as well. Now, so far, we've only raised $1,990 towards our $5,000
Come
goal,
on, you guys. Come on, you guys.
which is our slowest fundraiser yet. So please do give generously before the fundraiser ends on April 15. All funds go towards the Pixel Project's work to help end violence against women. To find out more about our work and what you can do to help end violence against women, visit the Pixel Project's website at www.thepixelproject.net. So that's all from us today at the Pixel Project. Thank you again so much, SJ, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, everyone else. Have a good day or good night wherever you are in the world. See you all.
Bye, everybody.